Good afternoon and welcome at this broadcast of Osm Tv. My guest today is the violinist Sam Durrant, recently appointed at the QSO as the artistic leader and at the OSM as violin lecturer. Welcome. I think many Bloemfonteiners has welcomed you quite a bit. So it's really great for us to have you here and a little bit about your background and your early career. And I want to start with Professor Jack de Wet.
Yes.
We had a brief discussion, we had lunch the other day, and I mean, he's South Africa's really legendary violin pedagogue. And you started studying with him at the age of?
At the age of 10.
Age of 10. Maybe you briefly want to say something about the Italian pedagogue. Who was your first teacher, in fact, at KwaZulu-Natal?
Yes, I was very privileged to be in the class of Vincenzo Castro. He was a really wonderful professor. I had him for 3.5 years before I moved to Jack de Wet. How it came about that I was in his class was one day my mother walked into a music shop and asked for the name of 3 violin teachers, of which he was one. She had great instincts that day and chose him accordingly, and I was in his class for 3.5 years, and he really catapulted everything that I have today.
Okay, so it was really foundational provided. Because quite often in South Africa you find that a person starts with a tani here and then continue with another tani there and then starts again at university. So we often have to change techniques. So I think it's wonderful that you have a really solid base, received a really solid base from him.
Yes, we in Durban were extremely lucky to have him. He unfortunately passed away in 2013, but his legacy still lives on through his students. Absolutely.
Okay. And now Jack de Wet, I mean, it's really a legend. He was really a legend. Tell me about your experiences. You were about 8 when you changed to him as your lecturer?
I was about 10 years old.
10 years.
I was turning 11 at the end of the year, and I met him in 2005. It was a fantastic discovery. We were encouraged by Dr. Raj Shapiro to go and have an audition with him in Cape Town. We were still living in Durban at the time. And those hours in his studio in Bloemfontein, because he'd already retired from all the major universities in the country, was really some of the most privileged hours I've ever experienced, and it was the beginning of a great and fantastic journey with arguably the best pedagogue in the country.
What exactly makes him so special? I know he's also he always developed continuously as a pedagogue. So he didn't remain with one scholastic interpretation. I always get the idea with some of his other students that he continuously investigated new developments, found new solutions.
Yes, so Professor Jack de Wet was famous for his experimentation. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and he always found himself going back to the drawing board and trying new things and trying different ways and approaches to get somewhere. I would probably say his school of technique is closest to the Alexander technique in terms of the relaxation required and the greatest muscle use with minimum input and maximum output. I think what made him so special was that every single one of his students was treated as an individual.
Fantastic.
So when he was doing these wonderful experiments of what can work and what can't work, you would never have the same lesson as a peer of yours.
Okay, so you really addressed your own unique capabilities, and that was really important for you.
Yes, it was very important for him, and I think that's why he found so much success through his students, is because he took a problem holistically and found solutions with you, and he would also challenge your thinking, which was really phenomenal. As much violin technique as I learned from him, I think the ability to think and to apply one's knowledge,
which is very important.
Yes, is the greatest skill he imparted to all of us. And I will forever be grateful for that, because you always must challenge your own thinking.
Then you went to university at UCT, at the South African College of Music, and you studied under Professor Farida Bakharova. Tell me a little bit about the change and the collaboration, because you had one certain perspective and then a completely different perspective. Was it so different? And how did you address and integrate the two different kind of approaches, if I may?
Absolutely. So the transition wasn't the easiest because there was a very particular system of application that we used in the vet kind of school of training. whereas Professor Farida's approach was really methodical, incredibly brilliant, and really trying to draw skills from the player in as much time as allotted at university.
During your career, your student career, you actually received quite a few prizes and participated in competitions. Can you tell me a little bit more how this experiences influenced your musical journey?
Absolutely. So what I'm most grateful for is that I've always had teachers that have trained me to approach competitions in what I believe is the right way. When you win, that's fantastic, but you learn more when you don't. And I've always been able to, with my professors and with my family, take losses and or failures in a very positive way, in most constructively, that you improve on what you believe happened or what didn't go as well as you had hoped. And I've been very grateful to have been trained with those skills from a very early age. One of the competitions I'm probably most proud of winning was the UCT Shock Foundation competition.
Yes, I read something about that in your CV.
Yes, and the reason why is because it was a chamber music competition. And little did I realize that this would eventually one day become my career path. I am exceptionally grateful to be a member of a string quartet. I don't think this privilege in life, wherever you are situated, happens very often. And to think that I'm here in Bloemfontein as a member of the Odeion string quartet is something I probably only ever dreamed of.
How do you approach your role as a pedagogue? You're known to be a very concise and a driven lecturer. How do you see your own pedagogy?
I hope to implement what I have been given. I think it's very important to give back in this way. I have had the privilege of arguably having the best pedagogues in the country my entire career and from childhood, and I hope to impart to whichever student is in front of me or whatever I'm lecturing that love for knowledge and for skill-based learning is adopted by the students I have.
What do you think of the perspective of solo tuition versus chamber music tuition? Because I often find in South Africa, it's my own perspective, that there's so much emphasis on the solo tuition, and I always get the idea that the chamber music is playing second fiddle. So how are you going to approach that? Especially with ensembles, I mean, because it's an elongation of your solo tuition if you, for example, are serving as an instructor to a certain band or group.
Ensembles in general are arguably the most important part of musical training. I think it's incredibly important. The sooner you start, the better. I was very lucky to have been exposed to festivals such as the Franschhoek Mountain Chamber Music Festival when I was 9 years old, the Stellenbosch Chamber Music Festival when I was 10 years old, which I do understand is a little bit younger than most. However, the skills and the invaluable tuition I learned in sitting in a group, in realizing that uniformity is so critical to whatever we do, is, I think, arguably the most important part. It's very important to be set up technically correctly, to be able to execute solo repertoire and solo techniques, but the heart of what we do lies in chamber music and ensembles and shouldn't be neglected. I was very privileged when I grew up. There were wonderful youth orchestras to attend, wonderful chamber music courses, that some of them are still around today, and I really encourage anybody that's eligible to do them. You will walk out a completely different person. But I think the heart of what we do here in South Africa as well, because we're unified, you know, we have a lot of incredible individuals in this country, but we are always best when we are standing together and doing things together. Ensemble should not be treated in any different way.
I really think it's very important. During our first conversation, I also mentioned to you when the Camerata was in St. Petersburg in Russia, I was so amused. I went to the classes of the first years. They have this kind of technical classes which they define as string clinician work. And all the first years, of course, it's a vast conservatory, it's 1,500 or even more. And all the first years get together and there's a certain class presented to them, like a ballet class, working on technique, working on intonation, working on homogeny. I really find it very interesting. I participated in several masterclasses for a young person, and I really believe in masterclasses because, especially for you students, you're supposed to be an intellectually liberated person, so you can think for yourself, especially if you're stable. Obviously, maybe for first year it might be not so viable, or to observe is of course a different perspective. But if you are a dedicated, intelligent human being, I think you can really integrate things to your current technique and then add new things and maybe leave other things, and also define things that you identify, things that's maybe not so relevant for you. I saw you had masterclasses in the Netherlands, Italy, Switzerland. How did you experience this? Was it consecutively in one time frames, or did you do several masterclasses on different time zones?
I did several masterclasses over a number of years, I think about 5 years. Mm-hmm. I was very privileged. Every opportunity I was given, mm-hmm. I was supported by South Africa and the Music Society here in South Africa tremendously, and I am eternally grateful because the exposure I got to some of the best pedagogues in the world, it is totally invaluable. Yeah. My time in the Netherlands was a bit of a dual situation where we were given masterclasses by members of the Concertgebouw.
Okay.
One of my favorite orchestras.
Wasn't that facilitated by the South African National Youth Orchestra Foundation?
In collaboration with the KwaZulu-Natal Philharmonic Orchestra.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
So we were there for 5 days, and we were given masterclasses on chamber music again.
Yeah.
And
by the members of the orchestra.
By the members of the orchestra. It was really a fantastic experience. We unfortunately weren't able to watch a concert of theirs. However, yes, they were out of season. However, they were busy with Peak Down, Tchaikovsky's Peak Down, and we got to watch a rehearsal of theirs, and I will never in my life forget it. I could not believe how there was a section solo in the first violins, and I had to lean over into the pit because I couldn't believe more than one person was playing.
Yeah.
They are really an exceptionally remarkable orchestra. One of my favorite in the world, of course, as is with many. But we had this incredible opportunity to get to know them also on a personal level, and I think we've built really wonderful, strong connections with them over many years, and I know some of us still keep in contact, and whenever we're there we try and reach out, and it really was a phenomenal experience. At the time I was doing the bulk of my orchestral playing, so the influence it had on me watching the Concertgebouw, I had one goal in mind.
Compliments on your Dutch.
Thank you.
I'm looking here a little bit at your professional career. You were a young lady, and already early in your career you were appointed as the principal second violin of the Cape Philharmonic Orchestra. Yeah. Oh, it was in 2019, so there was COVID in between. How did you experience this opportunity? Because it's already entrance level as a leader.
So I was very, very lucky to be appointed so young.
How old were you?
I was 24 at the time.
Okay.
And it presented itself very unique challenges where I'm obviously working with very, very experienced orchestral players within my section and within the orchestra. And I'm very grateful to the Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra for embracing me. It really did feel family oriented, and they took this young player who had been an adult with them. I had been employed full-time with them for a year, a little bit in the second violins, a little bit in the first violins as a tutti player, and this was the first very big audition that I played. I'll never forget it. It was a very big panel, and as much as it was intimidating, I felt only stronger leaving that room. It was very, very good experience for me, and I had some of the most wonderful years of my professional career at the Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra.
And after your tenure at the Cape Town Philharmonic, you continued your studies again, and then you applied for a job at Bishop Stuyvesant College. as once again a pedagogue. Can you tell me a little bit more? Tell me a little bit more.
I didn't want to lose the opportunity of studying again with Professor Farida Bakarova. She is a fantastic pedagogue that just understands the approach to the instrument, and not only that, the musician. So I yearned to go back and study. Unfortunately, that had been a little bit delayed due to COVID. It was quite a difficult thing to commit to during that period, and I was very grateful to have been full-time with the orchestra. We worked a lot, and I was really grateful, because I know a lot of people weren't in that position and they didn't have full-time jobs. So after that, I realized that one of the things I had missed a lot and hadn't been able to explore to its full potential was teaching full-time. And I'm so grateful to Bishop's Diocesan College for taking the leap with me. I had quite a large studio there for just over a year. And I'm so grateful for the incredible opportunities, because how one had to approach it was always in a different way. And obviously, because these are not tertiary institution students, they have full schedules. So one has to find very clever ways of utilizing small amounts of time. And I'm very grateful for that, because I could implement wonderful practice methods and systems that wouldn't take too much time but would yield good results. I had a wonderful class and many really fantastic and compelling musicians. They are, I believe, doing wonderfully, and they will continue to do so without me, and on to the next teacher. It was a very unique opportunity for me, because before that I had been a full-time orchestral player, teaching occasionally on the sides. With the type of schedule an orchestral player has in this country, consistency of teaching can be a bit of a challenge. So I always did it with very minimal hours, for the reason that I could maintain my orchestral schedule. However, teaching full-time was a completely different ball game, and I think well worth my move, because I've gained invaluable.
It actually, the two different perspectives gave you quite a solid foundation for your new role, because obviously you're now in a position, yes, you are the artistic leader of the string quartet, but you're also one of the violin pedagogues, lecturers, pedagogues. See it in a way as a kind of a preparation for this two dual roles.
I obviously didn't realize it at the time when I had taken on this new challenge of being a pedagogue at Bishop's. However, in hindsight, I can definitely agree with you. Every experience I've ever been given and every opportunity I've been given, gratefully, has prepared me for the next.
Fantastic. Music technique is important. Violin technique, string technique is important. But how do you value the rhetorics as a musician to be really musical, creative, emotional, and the technique as the foundation? What I'm trying to say actually is, I can refine it, is people also focus on technique, but the other way, from another perspective, if you don't have a technique, you can't fly. So how do you approach these two different perspectives? Musicality, emotion, performing, and technique.
So technique is the foundation of everything we do, as you mentioned. However, if you don't have a musical intention, your technique loses its value. You must have a reason why you are trying to achieve something. So I don't feel that they are mutually exclusive. And I'm very lucky, one of my pedagogues really encouraged me to think in that direction. What would you like to gain and where would you like to get to? And then you trace backwards and go, right, how do we get there? And I think that's an incredibly valuable tool to learn, because you can be in a practice room for 3 to 6 hours only playing technique, and there are fantastic technicians of all string instruments. I mean, there really are some incredible examples, but sometimes people feel they wanted a little bit more. And the little bit more, I feel we always detract from. And that's our musical intention. So I feel that the perfect balance between the two, and challenging the student to ask them, how would you like to interpret this piece? Where are you striving? What kind of sound do you want to make? Is all very valuable to get to the end result.
Yeah, it really makes sense. I often see Gerard Korsten as a conductor, but I think he was in the recent years twice coming to the OSM to work also with students while he was conducting, and it was very fascinating because I've never seen him giving masterclasses one-on-one. And from the first moment, he immediately demanded musicality, and then he filled in the technical requirements, aspects, objectives. It was really interesting, and it was also interesting to see how young students cope with that. I was quite surprised because I was thinking if it was me, I would have a complete emotional background. So I want to also ask, what kind of music really moves you? Obviously Bach is one of them. We had a discussion the other day. So
classical music has always been my core. I was raised in a home that was the main music we listened to. I am not opposed to any other kind of music. Dare I say I am quite interested in electronic music. That's quite unusual to say, but
it's quite often the case. I mean, we have a colleague here, she's driving to the OSN with death metal. And you won't believe me if I tell you it is, but there's different influences, so I have also no problem with that. But I want to hear more about the classical composers that really moves you as an artist.
That's quite a long and extensive list, and I try and update it every 6 months. So, in no particular order, although I'm sure there is one, J.S. Bach, of course. I have been deeply moved by the music of Shostakovich.
Okay.
He has risen up my ranks over a number of years, and I'm very, very grateful. I never forced myself to like his music.
And that relationship continues. It's only now that I really have the stamina for the symphonies. I always liked all his chamber music and the concerti, that's fantastic, but in the beginning the symphonies was for me just too much, except the Leningrad. But it's amazing that you, like with Bach, you have this continuous relationship with his palette, and it keeps on developing. So it's a remarkable man in more than one way.
Yes, and a remarkable composer. That being said as well, the music of Prokofiev, I have adored since a very young age. I was exposed to his ballet music quite young. And
which one, Cinderella?
Cinderella, yes. I almost don't want to go on record saying this, but I think that's my absolute favourite ballet. The music of that is absolutely extraordinary. I had the great privilege of playing it a number of years ago, and it has always stuck with me. I've also played Romeo and Juliet. It's a completely different score. It's as masterful. But something about the colours that he gets out of the orchestra, and his orchestration is superb. Prokofiev is known for his incredible orchestration, and I think you really hear the master at work in the Cinderella.
And I wish we can hear more of his symphonies. It's really wonderful music. It's really special. How about the music of our times? Is there something that really speaks to you? Is it important to you? I mean, there's obviously also things that is not corresponding. You know, we have such a limited palette quite often in South Africa. But he says, are you open to the music of our times?
I'm very open to it, and I really hope that in the future our programs have more and more modern works, but not only that, South African compositions.
Very important. Because we never hear them. We never hear them. Of course, with smaller ensembles, but in symphony orchestras, I mean, there's hardly ever a piece by a South African composer.
And I think that should be more encouraged. We have really fantastic composers in this country that have done justice to their field for decades. We recently played Stefan Schrovier's
String Quartet.
Yes.
What's the name again?
Song of the African Spirit. And although it was maybe challenging listening, the more you play it, the more
it really grows on you.
not only that, but you start falling in love with it, and you realize how South African this music really is. And we're very lucky. As well as when I was growing up, I was very lucky. I was exposed to always modern violin concertos, and one of my favorite in the repertoire of all time, not just as a modern violin concerto, was, please excuse my pronunciation, Sofia Gubaidulina's violin concerto that was written for Anna Sophie Mutter, premiered in 2007, and it has stood the test of time. It's one of my top 10 favorite concertos for this instrument ever written. It is an extraordinary piece of composition, and it's very symphonic in nature.
And her oeuvre, in any way, it's really intact with our times, you know. It's not pretending. I think she really incorporates elements of social dilemmas. Provide me with some information. What is your dream for the Odeion String Quartet and at the OSM? Do you have any specific dreams or ideas, something that you would like to highlight?
I mean, I have two separate dreams, but they will merge at some point. But I don't want one to sound quite contrived, because they're long term.
Okay, here at the OSM we are really blessed with our collaboration with the Free State Symphony Orchestra, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity, especially for students, obviously, but also musicians, that they can play, that the top students or more advanced students have the opportunity to play as a cadet with their lecturers and mentors into this professional orchestra. You will also be serving as guest concertmaster, so I think that will also be a nice, you actually have now the best of all worlds here, not true? You have the string quartet, chamber music, academia, violin lecture, and orchestral players. So it's actually fantastic. I will use another word. Do you agree with me? I mean, it's a wonderful package.
Arguably the best package in the country. I'm incredibly lucky, and just to go one step back about the FSSO, it's incredibly important that students are exposed to sitting with professional players.
Yes.
That's
it's the most feasible mentorship.
Exactly.
So I really think it's a wonderful attribute to the Odeion School of Music that they can have that possibility, and that you can work for it. So it's not your first year or second year, it comes regularly, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity from an educational perspective.
It is, and learning through experience really is an invaluable tool that you cannot gain in a practice room. You can play perfectly and then find a new environment and not understand where and what and how. I think sitting in orchestras with professionals that you also look up to is an incredible motivational tool to keep striving for what you want to gain as a professional musician one day.
Thank you, Samantha. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And I wish you a fantastic time here amongst us.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to see what you're going to do and how you're going to approach it. We are really privileged to have you here in the Free State Plains, and I hope it's a superb time for you.
Thank you very much.